problem. And I wanted to talk to you about this from a readiness perspective, because you're still in the squadron. You've got friends that are out, I'm assuming, out of training now and have gone to their mission ready squadrons and those kind of things. And what we're hearing, for instance, during the House Armed Services Committee hearing to vote on this year's National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, Congressman Mike Johnson from Louisiana mentioned that if Secretary Austin refused to drop this vaccine mandate, that they should consider withdrawing his waiver. A four-star general has to have a waiver if they've not been out of the military for 10 years before they can be appointed to a position like Secretary of Defense. So that's well within Johnson's purview. But the reason he brought that up, and let me read it to you, he's got a lot of information. The deadline was the end of June for Department of Defense. So at that point, the Army, this is just the Army, had only met 40% of its recruiting goals, but 13% of the National Guard, 10% of the reserves, and over 24,000 active duty soldiers were facing expulsion at the end of June. And of course, this is 4th of July, so they'll find out what their fate is by the end of the week. And if something doesn't happen, we're going to cut all of those, while at the same time, we have not met our recruiting goals. We've only met 40% of our recruiting goals. And just the last week of June, the United States Army, for the first time since I think it was in the all-volunteer force in the 70s, I believe, has dropped its requirement for entries, enlistees, to have a high school diploma. That's incredible. We haven't done that in 50 years. I'm 60 years old and joined in 1978 and had to have a high school diploma or a GED equivalent. There was no coming in as a high school dropout, but now you can be a soldier in the United States Army as a high school dropout. What are you hearing on the Air Force side? Are you guys and gals, are you feeling a similar issue with both retention and recruiting? Are you seeing that happening? And
yes, absolutely. I sure am. And so I'll give you a few anecdotal pieces of evidence here that kind of show exactly what the lay of the land is like. And I'd like to tack on to, in addition to people with no high school diploma being allowed into the Army now, it was just announced that service members with HIV can now deploy. And so as a service member who's unvaccinated, I cannot deploy. I'm considered undeployable, but those with HIV can deploy. And so there's just things that just don't simply make sense to me in this. And I spoke to a guardsman, and for the sake of his privacy, I won't speak with which unit he's with. He told me that he has people out the door trying to apply to his units because they're wanting to get out of active duty. And they've been telling him, like, fairly selective, especially in the fighter. Many people get into them. They pretty much said, we're going to go to the if we can't get into the Guard. And so when you look at that, it's just that there's this mass exodus already happening. I was looking at the DoD's own data on their force numbers to try and get an idea of how many people were unvaccinated recently. And I noticed an alarming trend, and that was that the DoD's own data on their total force, and so that's number of service members in uniform, active, Guard, and reserve. Those numbers that we have in our total force strength have been dwindling rapidly. I'll give you this number. Since when the mandates came out, we've lost 53 service members. And that's not people who have been discharged from the vaccine, because that number is quite a bit smaller as folks start to begin the process of getting discharged. So those are just other individuals who are leaving the service for whatever reason. And in the month of April, we lost 10,000 service members in that month alone. That's the highest number in 10 years that we've lost in a single month. And that's since the Obama era of our military. And so when you look at that, we're seeing pretty much a mass exodus. And I think it's pretty clear now that the Department of Defense is desperate to meet their goals. The Air Force just recently announced that had the lowest enlisted recruiting since 1999. Though when you look at all this data and put it all together, you realize pretty quickly that we are in a manning and recruiting crisis, and no one's really talking about it, at least not as much as they should be at all. And so I think the American people, especially, who pay and expect our military to keep them safe, should be asking these questions, and they're entitled to the answers. And so, senators have put out a lot of requests for information, and that information has gone unanswered in terms of like how many people are unvaccinated in the military, who is being discharged, what does their experience look like. And so we, as pilots, took it upon ourselves to quantify that data, and I'd be happy to talk about that as well.